we have found this very interesting complex of tunnels, 25 and 35 meters down. So it encouraged us to continue searching for Cleopatra.
They searched for decades. Then, in the ruins of a forgotten temple near Alexandria, they found something that shouldn't exist, a burial chamber that might belong to Cleopatra herself. For over 2,000 years, the final resting place of Egypt's last pharaoh has remained one of history's greatest mysteries. But recent discoveries at an ancient temple west of Alexandria have unveiled something truly chilling. A massive underwater tunnel, submerged chambers, and evidence that suggests Cleopatra's tomb might have been swallowed by the sea itself. This isn't just about finding a lost queen anymore. What archaeologists are uncovering raises disturbing questions about what really happened after her death and why her tomb was never meant to be found. Let's dive into the mystery together and uncover what really lies inside Cleopatra's lost tomb. The woman who ruled an empire. Before we dive into the shocking discoveries, let's talk about who Cleopatra really was, because this wasn't just some beautiful queen from ancient times. This was a woman who spoke 9 languages, outsmarted Rome's greatest generals, and nearly changed the course of Western civilization. Cleopatra, the 7th, was born in 69 BC into the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek family that ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries. But unlike her ancestors, who barely bothered to learn Egyptian, Cleopatra immersed herself in the culture. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler in 300 years to actually speak the Egyptian language. That alone tells you something about her intelligence and political savvy. She didn't just inherit power, she seized it. At 18, she was exiled by her younger brother, who wanted the throne for himself. Most people would have given up, but Cleopatra smuggled herself back into the palace, allegedly rolled up in a carpet, and presented herself to Julius Caesar. That meeting changed everything. She convinced the most powerful man in the world to help her reclaim her throne. That's not luck. That's pure strategic genius. The alliance that shook Rome. Caesar wasn't just charmed by Cleopatra. He was genuinely impressed by her mind. Here was a woman who understood economics, naval warfare, and diplomacy better than most of his own advisors. They formed an alliance that was both political and romantic, and soon Cleopatra gave birth to a son, Caesarion, who Caesar acknowledged as his own. Think about what this meant. Egypt's wealth could have financed Rome's expansion indefinitely. Cleopatra's son could have united 2 empires, but then Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC, and everything Cleopatra had built started crumbling. She returned to Egypt, but she knew her position was precarious. Rome was descending into civil war, and whoever emerged victorious would decide Egypt's fate. She needed another powerful ally, and fast. Enter Mark Antony. Mark Antony was one of Rome's greatest military commanders and part of the Second Triumvirate, ruling Rome after Caesar's death. When he summoned Cleopatra to meet him in Tarsus, she didn't just show up. She arrived on a golden barge with purple sails, dressed as the goddess Venus, surrounded by attendants dressed as cupids. The Roman historian Plutarch described the scene as so spectacular that word spread through the city like wildfire. Antony was supposed to be interrogating her about her loyalty. Instead, he fell completely under her spell. Their relationship was different from her partnership with Caesar. This was passionate, reckless, and ultimately tragic. Together, they dreamed of creating an empire that would rival Rome itself. Antony divorced his Roman wife, married Cleopatra in an Egyptian ceremony, and began distributing Rome's eastern territories to her and their children. Rome was furious. They saw Cleopatra as a foreign seductress who had corrupted one of their greatest heroes. Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and Antony's rival, used this outrage to turn Rome against them both. The battle that changed everything. In 31 BC, everything came to a head at the Battle of Actium. Antony and Cleopatra's combined naval forces faced off against Octavian's fleet off the coast of Greece. It should have been a close fight, but something went terribly wrong. In the middle of the battle, Cleopatra's ships suddenly broke formation and fled. Antony, seeing her retreat, abandoned his own forces and followed her back to Egypt. His fleet, leaderless and confused, was decimated. It was a crushing defeat that sealed their fate. Historians still debate why Cleopatra retreated. Some say she panicked. Others believe it was a calculated decision to preserve her treasury ships. Whatever the reason, it was the beginning of the end. The final days. Octavian marched into Alexandria, and there was no escape left for Antony and Cleopatra. Ancient accounts say Antony became very ill and was brought to Cleopatra, who had locked herself in her mausoleum with her treasures. He passed away soon after, with Cleopatra by his side. Cleopatra now faced Octavian, the man who would soon become Rome's first emperor. She tried to bargain with him, as she had with other Roman leaders, but he remained focused on one goal: bringing her to Rome as a symbol of his victory. Cleopatra understood what that would mean. According to ancient writers, she did not want to be paraded as a captive. On August 12, 30 BCE, at the age of 39, she died in Alexandria. The well-known story tells of a serpent, though modern historians believe she may have used another method. The mystery begins. Here's where things get strange. Ancient sources claim that Octavian, despite everything, allowed Cleopatra to be buried beside Mark Antony in a tomb worthy of her status. The Roman historian Plutarch wrote that she was buried with royal splendor and magnificence. But where? That's the question that has haunted archaeologists for over 2 millennia. You'd think the tomb of Egypt's last pharaoh would be one of the most famous monuments in the ancient world, but it vanished without a trace. Ancient Alexandria, where she died, is now largely underwater or buried beneath modern buildings. Centuries of earthquakes, tsunamis, and rising sea levels have transformed the coastline completely. Whatever tombs or monuments existed in Cleopatra's time have been destroyed, buried, or submerged. For years, most experts assumed her tomb was somewhere in ancient Alexandria, lost forever beneath the modern city. But one determined archaeologist refused to accept that answer: the lawyer who became a tomb hunter. Dr. Kathleen Martinez wasn't supposed to be an archaeologist. She was a successful criminal defense attorney in the Dominican Republic, living a comfortable life far from the deserts of Egypt. But she had been obsessed with Cleopatra since childhood, and one day she had a realization that would change her life. Everyone was looking in the wrong place. Martinez studied ancient texts and came across references to Taposiris Magna, a temple complex about 30 miles west of Alexandria. The name means Great Tomb of Osiris, and it was built during the Ptolemaic period when Cleopatra ruled. More importantly, the temple was dedicated to Osiris and Isis, two deities intimately connected with death and resurrection. In ancient Egyptian belief, Isis used her magical powers to resurrect Osiris after he was murdered and dismembered by his brother Set. This myth was central to Egyptian views of the afterlife, and Cleopatra deliberately cultivated her image as the living embodiment of Isis. Martinez theorized that Cleopatra, knowing her death was imminent, might have chosen to be buried at Taposiris Magna to symbolically align herself with Isis and Osiris. It would have been the ultimate statement. Even in death, she remained Egypt's divine queen. 20 years of digging. In 2005, Martinez convinced Egyptian authorities to let her excavate at Taposiris Magna. Many archaeologists thought she was wasting her time. The site had been explored before and yielded nothing spectacular. Why would Cleopatra be buried in a temple 30 miles from her capital when convention said she should be near her palace? But Martinez was relentless. For nearly 2 decades, she dug, explored, and refused to give up. And slowly, piece by piece, she began finding evidence that this place was far more important than anyone realized. First, she discovered coins bearing Cleopatra's image and name. Then came statues and artifacts from the Ptolemaic period. She found a massive cemetery containing over 2,000 mummies, all buried in a style that mixed Egyptian and Greek traditions, exactly what you'd expect from Cleopatra's multicultural era. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come: the geometric miracle. In November 2022, Martinez and her team made a breakthrough that sent shockwaves through the archaeological world. Deep beneath the temple of Taposiris Magna, they discovered a tunnel. Not just any tunnel, but what Egyptian officials called a geometric miracle. The tunnel stretches for an astonishing 4,300 feet, or more than 1,300 meters. It's located 43 feet underground and is about 6 feet tall. The engineering required to build something like this in ancient times was extraordinary. The precision, the scale, the sheer ambition of it suggests this was no ordinary construction project. But here's what makes it truly disturbing. Parts of the tunnel are completely submerged in water. At first, archaeologists thought this was just groundwater seepage or damage from ancient earthquakes. But as they explored further, they realized something far more dramatic had happened. The tunnel doesn't just connect different parts of the temple complex. It extends all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, the city that sank. To truly understand what archaeologists have uncovered, we first need to revisit what happened to Egypt's northern coast after Cleopatra's death. For centuries, the region was struck by devastating earthquakes that reshaped the land and the sea. The most destructive of all occurred around 365 AD. A cataclysmic quake, followed by a colossal tsunami that crashed into the coastline with unimaginable force. Ancient accounts describe waves towering over the city walls and sweeping entire communities into the sea. The event didn't just damage Egypt's coastal cities, it permanently changed them. In the aftermath of that disaster, much of ancient Alexandria, the city that once stood as the cultural heart of the Hellenistic world, was swallowed by the Mediterranean. Palaces that once hosted Egypt's royal court, majestic temples that honored the gods, and entire city districts were consumed by the rising waters. Over time, the sea claimed what remained, leaving the once great capital half buried beneath silt and salt water. For centuries, Alexandria's underwater ruins remained hidden from human eyes, a ghostly reminder of a vanished civilization lying quietly beneath the waves. Modern archaeologists, armed with advanced sonar and diving technology, have begun to rediscover this lost world. What they've found on the seabed near Alexandria is nothing short of astonishing. Massive statues of ancient rulers, colossal stone blocks engraved with hieroglyphs, and remnants of temple complexes once thought to be lost forever. These underwater discoveries not only confirm the scale of the destruction, but also provide clues about the city's layout, economy, and spiritual life. Each artifact pulled from the sea adds another piece to the puzzle of Egypt's most enigmatic period. This is why Dr. Kathleen Martinez believes that the same fate may have befallen Taposiris Magna, the temple complex where she continues her search for Cleopatra's tomb. The geological evidence supports her theory: cracks, water seepage, and structural damage consistent with seismic activity. If Taposiris Magna was indeed struck by the same series of earthquakes and floods, then Cleopatra's final resting place might not lie under the desert sands at all, but beneath the very waters that erased much of her kingdom's ancient glory. The underwater discovery. In September 2024, Martinez partnered with legendary underwater explorer Bob Ballard, the man who discovered the Titanic. Using advanced sonar and underwater robots, they began mapping the seafloor off the coast of Taposiris Magna. What they found was stunning. Massive man-made structures lying beneath the waves, stone foundations, architectural remains, and evidence of a significant ancient port that no one knew existed. This wasn't natural rock formations. This was a deliberately constructed complex that had been swallowed by the Mediterranean. The team discovered that the tunnel doesn't end at the modern coastline. It continues underwater, connecting the temple to what was once a thriving port city. In ancient times, this would have been above sea level, bustling with ships and merchants. Now, it's a ghostly underwater landscape, preserved in the dark depths of the sea. Could Cleopatra's tomb be down there, sealed in a submerged chamber that has remained untouched for over 2,000 years? The disturbing evidence. As the excavation continued, the team made increasingly unsettling discoveries. Inside the tunnel, they found pottery fragments, traces of ancient ceremonies, and most chillingly, evidence of deliberate sealing and concealment. Someone didn't just build this tunnel, they went to extraordinary lengths to hide it and make it difficult to access. Why would you do that unless you were protecting something incredibly valuable or incredibly secret? They also discovered a white marble bust that many believe depicts Cleopatra herself. The statue shows a woman wearing a royal crown with features that match other known representations of the queen. If this is indeed Cleopatra, finding it at Taposiris Magna significantly strengthens Martinez's theory. But perhaps the most disturbing find was evidence of the tunnel's sudden flooding. The way water filled certain sections suggests this wasn't gradual seepage over centuries. Something catastrophic happened, possibly during Cleopatra's time or shortly after, that caused parts of this complex to flood rapidly. What are they hiding from? Here's where speculation gets really interesting. Why would Cleopatra choose to be buried in such an elaborate, hidden location? Traditional pharaohs built massive pyramids and temples to proclaim their greatness for eternity. Cleopatra was obsessed with her legacy and spent her entire reign cultivating her divine image. So why hide? Some researchers believe she knew that Octavian and Rome would try to erase her from history. And they were right. After her death, Octavian, who became Emperor Augustus, systematically destroyed images of Cleopatra and tried to suppress her story. Egyptian records were altered or destroyed. Her children were killed or disappeared from historical records. By hiding her tomb in a remote temple dedicated to Osiris and Isis and potentially connecting it to an elaborate tunnel system, Cleopatra might have been ensuring that her real burial place would remain secret from her enemies. She was protecting herself not just in death, but for eternity. But there's another, darker possibility. What if Cleopatra's tomb contains something that certain powerful people didn't want discovered? Documents, treasures, or revelations that could challenge the official Roman version of history? The race against time. Excavating underwater archaeological sites is incredibly difficult and expensive. The tunnel is partially flooded, making exploration dangerous. Sediment and debris have accumulated over 2 millennia, and every year, coastal erosion threatens to destroy what little remains above water. Martinez and her team are in a race against time. Climate change is causing sea levels to rise, which means more of the site will be submerged soon. Storms and strong currents can damage delicate structures, and tourism and development in the area pose constant threats to preservation. They need specialized equipment, underwater robots, sonar imaging, diving teams, and conservation experts. Each expedition costs millions of dollars and requires permissions from multiple Egyptian government agencies. It's a logistical nightmare, complicated by political instability in the region. Yet, Martinez remains committed. She spent 20 years of her life on this quest, turned down more lucrative opportunities, and faced skepticism from academic peers who thought her theory was impossible. Now, with evidence mounting, she's convinced she's on the verge of the most important archaeological discovery of the 21st century. What could be inside? If they find Cleopatra's tomb, what might they discover? Based on what we know about Ptolemaic burial practices and Cleopatra's status, the tomb would likely be extraordinary. First, there would be her sarcophagus, possibly made of gold or elaborately carved stone. Ancient texts suggest she was buried with royal splendor, so we'd expect precious materials and expert craftsmanship. Mark Antony's body should be there too, if the ancient accounts are accurate. But beyond the bodies themselves, the tomb could contain treasures that would rival King Tut's discovery. Cleopatra was one of the richest rulers in the ancient world. Her palace was legendary for its wealth. She could have been buried with jewelry, gold, precious stones, ceremonial objects, and personal items that would give us unprecedented insights into her life. More importantly, there could be documents. The ancient library of Alexandria was still functioning during Cleopatra's time, and she was known to be an avid scholar. She might have been buried with scrolls containing her own writings, letters, or accounts of her reign. These would be absolutely priceless for understanding this period of history. And here's the really disturbing thought. What if the tomb contains evidence that contradicts the Roman propaganda about Cleopatra? What if there are documents that prove she was murdered rather than committing self-injury? What if there are records showing that Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, survived longer than history claims? The stakes are incredibly high. The discovery of Cleopatra's tomb wouldn't just be a cool archaeological find. It would fundamentally change how we understand ancient history. This woman ruled one of the most important civilizations on Earth during a pivotal moment when the ancient world was transforming into what would become the Roman Empire. For Egypt, finding Cleopatra's tomb would be a source of immense national pride and a massive boost to tourism. The discovery would rival the opening of King Tut's tomb in 1922, which sparked worldwide fascination with ancient Egypt that continues today. For historians, it would provide answers to questions that have puzzled scholars for generations. How did Cleopatra really die? What was her relationship with Mark Antony truly like? How did she view her own role as the last pharaoh? What did she think about Rome's conquest of Egypt? And for the world, it would be a reminder of one of history's most fascinating women, someone who has been mythologized, misunderstood, and misrepresented for over 2,000 years. Finding her tomb would let Cleopatra tell her own story in her own way, without Roman propaganda filtering every detail. But it would also be bittersweet, because discovering her tomb means disturbing her eternal rest, the very thing she went to such lengths to protect. Beneath an ancient temple west of Alexandria lies a vast tunnel system stretching toward the Mediterranean, much of it still hidden and flooded. Evidence links the site to Cleopatra's era, and Dr. Kathleen Martinez believes she's just meters away from her long-lost tomb. Whether it remains intact, looted, or submerged, each new discovery brings us closer to solving one of history's greatest mysteries. What do you think? Is Cleopatra's tomb really at Taposiris Magna, or is this just another dead end in a search that has frustrated historians for millennia? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe.